Welcome to Driven. I'm your host, Paul Perrone. We're going to learn and talk about AI, robotics, autonomous vehicles, and so much more. Check us out at driven.show on the web and give us a thumbs up or subscribe here if you like the show. So kick back or buckle up and become driven. This is a special informational episode of Driven. It's a recording of a talk that I gave at the National Institute of Standards and Technology, aka NIST. It was earlier this year on January 18th, 2024. The topic is why autonomous vehicles are the world's most complicated technical problem. It's purposefully assertive and certainly debatable, but I hope that you'll find the topic enjoyable and informative as it does attempt to communicate a perspective, an insight, and some thoughts on why AV development has been so hard for industry. Why is this such a complicated problem? NIST hosts a colloquia series covering a wide range of science and engineering topics, and I was honored to be invited and present this talk. So check out the NIST website at www.nist.gov for more information specifically on the vital role that NIST plays in advancing measurement science, standards, and technology. And now, please enjoy my presentation on autonomous vehicles, the world's most complicated technical problem. Thank you for coming out in this cold weather. Hopefully one day soon, the autonomous vehicles will be taking you safely from your home to these locations. So, to start that off, I'm going to talk about autonomous vehicles and why I think it's the world's most complicated technical problem. Now, you may disagree, but we can. I'm going to try to convince you of that and provide some reasons for the complexities and some paths to mitigation. So, what do you think of when you hear the term autonomous vehicles? I just had a conversation with Dr. Wollman, and we were talking about automated versus autonomous, and then there's driverless, self-driving, all kinds of terms out there. But my experience has been that people think of consumer-grade vehicles, like what the Tesla may eventually have, and other auto manufacturers are promoting as sort of the vision in the future for autonomous driving, consumer-grade vehicles. Some think of robo-taxis, like the ones that you've heard of in San Francisco and Phoenix from GM's Cruise division and Alphabet's Waymo vehicle effort, the Google effort. Often there's a portrait painted of a future of these driverless vehicles in such form and statements that it's just a couple years away. It's just a year away, and we've been hearing that for tens of years. And this is coming from very intelligent people who are in the field, but we keep on missing these milestones, right? And why is that? Some companies have found that this is obviously a very challenging problem. Some companies, unfortunately, have gone out of business. Some have shut down their AV business divisions. So what's making this so hard? Why have all these predictions been sort of for when we're going to have autonomous vehicles for the masses? Why have they all been sort of missed? And so the first part of that is answering what is an AV. And because I love ChatGPT, I created this Unreal vehicle, which is an illustration of a vehicle. Obviously, that's the first thing you have to have is a vehicle. And passengers, typically maybe some cargo, goods that may be transported, and then some sort of AV, autonomous vehicle or automated vehicle package, which is sensors, controls, onboard electronics, and what have you. And then, very importantly, the environment. What's the domain of operation, aka the operational design domain, or the ODD, in which these vehicles are operating. And in the case of ground vehicles, we're operating on the ground with many humans and other cars and what have you. And I've been working on this problem for about 20 years, and have many peers in the space, have been a student of other tech industry histories as well. And I've concluded somewhat recently that after 20 years in this space, this is the world's most complicated technical problem. And I wish I knew that 20 years ago, but I wasn't one of the smart ones. And so why do I say that? We're building a brain, for one, in the autonomy. It's essentially we're trying to replicate exactly or as precisely and even better all the things that we do when we drive a vehicle. The perception, the assessment of risks, assessment of where these objects are operating in and around our vehicle, the decisions we have to make for certain maneuvers. Are we going to do a U-turn here? Are we going to make a left? Are we going to go around these emergency vehicles? So it's in many ways it's harder than brain surgery because we're creating a brain. We're not just sort of operating on one, which is the most complicated organic organism. I think one of the most complicated organic organisms that we know of is the human brain. So we're trying to build and replicate this, and that's a very difficult task, essentially. Or we're trying to build or replicate it at least enough such that it can drive a car. So pretty complicated. We're also operating on ground-based terrain. There's UAVs, aerial vehicles, there's USVs, water surface vehicles, UUVs underwater, there's vehicles that operate in space, and then there's ground vehicles. And 4 of those 5 operational domains have, they all have their own complications, of course, but they don't have as many things operating in and around the environment as we do on the ground. Human beings, dogs, deer, other cars, all kinds of weather conditions and things, and unknown events that what we call edge cases that we experience in operating in these environments and don't expect. And so I'm not saying it's, rocket science is hard. It's definitely hard, and I'm not going to say anything but ground vehicles and these unstructured environments, these dynamic environments, are very, very, very difficult, especially when you obviously you don't want to hurt anybody, you don't want to do any damage to anything, and there's just an extraordinary amount of liability associated with consumer grade vehicles getting in and around these environments. So if you're familiar with David Letterman and his top 10 list, hopefully he won't see this and sue me for copyright infringement or anything, but he is retired. But I started to think, what makes this complicated? Why is it the most complicated problem? Why do I think that? And there is the rocket science and the brain surgery analogy, but more specifically, and I first started out saying, well, I'm just going to pick 3 things, because that would be simple. But then they just started stacking up, so I had to stop at 10. And in no particular order, I've picked 10 things from a practitioner's point of view, developing these vehicles, managing people who are working these vehicles, talking to colleagues in the space over the years. And these are the top 10 things that I think are what makes making autonomous vehicles extremely complicated. And some mitigations, some ideas, hints and allegations to what we might be able to do to solve the problem. And it's multifaceted, as you'll see. There's no silver bullet. There's no one problem that if we just tackle that, if we just throw machine learning at this, we're going to be good. That's been proven false. And there's startups and other companies in the space. They come out of the gates, raring to go, and with this thing that's just going to make it all happen. And then, as we've seen, there's 100 other things that have to be accomplished in the process to make it commercially viable, right? To generate revenue, which will give these companies longevity beyond whatever their investors are willing to pitch in to keep them going. So let's begin. and again, in no particular order. And all of these pictures are GPT generated, so there are no copyright infringements aside from what they're derived from, which has not been proven in court yet, so I think we're safe. So yeah, beware of like weird things that may crop up because these machines hallucinate. But the complexity of hardware adaptation, there are hundreds of components in these vehicles, off-the-shelf components, LiDAR, radar, what have you, tens of thousands of subcomponents because of what those components are made of, and hundreds of thousands, if not more, failure modes that can occur with all of these things, especially given the interconnection complexity of connecting all these different devices. And of course, as you know, there's lots of failures at the point of interfacing between components. And then there's just component diversity and quirks. We're using components in these vehicles like LiDAR, thermal imaging sensors or whatever. These are not things that you can go to Walmart and buy, right? So these aren't like mass produced in a way for a consumer. And even the things that are produced for consumers sometimes are not easily understood. But the devices that we're working with are not always well documented and have many undocumented features, as we like to refer to them, right? So things that aren't in the manual, and that's compounded because there's hundreds of these components. There's a lot of variation of specs, specifications, version and configuration management. Yeah, you buy a sensor and you have it at time t0, and then you're going to build more vehicles, and now you have there's a new rev with new firmware, and just sort of this process of keeping up with all these components and making sure they're all up to date adds a lot of time and energy to making these vehicles reliable. There's provider longevity. There's I don't know, there were 100 LiDAR companies, and they're not all going to make it, and they not all have been making it. Component availability, supply chain type issues, and then just skills alignment, getting people focused on subsets of these components, and whereas they may have never been exposed based on their prior work to this type of technology because it's all kind of new. And this isn't really like a huge revelation, but I point it out because this is actually probably one of the things that takes I think a lot of this is solvable, but it takes an extraordinary amount of time. And there's just so many things that happen when we're fielding autonomous vehicles that ultimately boil down to something that's related to the underlying hardware adaptation. And I don't just say that because I'm a software person. But I was an electrical engineer by training, so I have my hardware hat on as well. So some mitigations are more integration of these modules, such that we have, instead of 100 different things, we have something that's been more tightly integrated and packaged, submodules that can just work. Controlled ODD evolution. I don't think we're at the point, and you're going to see when I talk about the path to autonomy, that we're ready for wide open on-road autonomy now, and potentially even within the next couple years. But that we need to kind of be operating in these more controlled, geofenced applications where we can actually bring real autonomous capability to the world now. The scale of deployments is obviously going to drive the scale of production, which will certainly help with smoothing out the quirks and the hard edges on these types of subsystems. The standardization, I'll be preaching to the choir here, is I think certainly very important in terms of standardizing how these different components should come together and talk to one another, and what the specifications should be for LiDAR and radar and the things that you're using. And then, wearing my safety hat, redundancy, of course, and watchdog checking, having independent systems that are verifying and validating the onboard system in real time, such that we can ultimately certify. You have to do some stuff offline for certification, but online, verify and validate that these systems are operating correctly, and fail-safe if need be. And then ultimately, a stable manufacturing ecosystem, right, that will make being able to buy the components that you need. These are going to be the tier 1 suppliers and other suppliers for other industries, not just automotive, that will eventually stabilize and make this problem easier. Then there's software, and this is what the GPT thinks of software, I guess. They're just these glowing orange boxes. So I don't quite know what that is, but so none of this would be useful without software. You need software to do many things. And again, there's hundreds of software processes. There can be, maybe tens to hundreds of processes that are running. And then tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, of discrete software modules like classes in the object-oriented sense of the term, or other software components. Millions, maybe even accountably infinite number of failure modes with software, and so that's a big problem. And other spaces have these problems, right? Like NASA and building those types of complex machines. But what you have here is you have a lot of consumer and even startup companies trying to do this, right? They're not NASA. They're not the size of NASA. And so you've got a lot of much smaller organizations trying to tackle this problem at like similar scale of, or at least, on the path to similar scale of complexity. And then within this, you're doing things like perception, replicating what people see and translating that into objects that they should avoid or maybe just not avoid. Is it a pizza box on the road that I'm just going to run over, or is it, a cat, And then the fusion of all of this information from all the different sensors that are on the vehicle, calibrating, software calibration are we seeing something over here, or is it really over here because we don't have proper calibration? Like, that's important. Is it on the road or off the road? Am I going to hit it or not? And movement planning, which is just a big name for a lot of complicated things, all the maneuvers that you have to do: forward collision avoidance, lane keeping, pacing, U-turns, parking, making lefts at intersections, handling traffic lights, all the things that we have to do in navigating in these environments, and then the steps and the sequencing through each of these. Each maneuver is complicated, and then the arbitration of all these maneuvers. Which one should take priority? Obviously, the ones that deal with collision avoidance should. But is that kicking in and giving us a false positive? And are we getting a sudden stop? Are we throwing someone into the around inside this shuttle? So all of this needs to be considered. And then I'm sure a lot of you have heard, edge cases. Oh, we've got another edge case. Sometimes that's just an excuse for something that they forgot to consider that was already on their roadmap. But a lot of these are real edge cases. The unfortunate accident with Cruise in San Francisco last year was a good example of another vehicle hitting somebody, and that person sort of being jettisoned in front of the vehicle, and then it was the person was under the Cruise vehicle, and unfortunately the vehicle proceeded and it drug this person 20 feet or something like that. But it was horrifying, and that was an edge case, not something that they were thinking about. And they, meaning GM Cruise, one of the biggest players and loaded with a lot of smart people. So that's not like Monday morning quarterbacking. That's just pointing out that it's, again, very hard problem, thinking through all these edge cases. Safety and security verification, making sure that how do you verify and validate the safety of software? Some might consider that an oxymoron. It's a complex, very complex challenge. And then all the supporting tools, onboard, offboard, user interfaces, dispatch tools, analysis, simulation, development, and skill alignment across all of these activities. And then mitigations. I think it's important that right now, given the moving target of hardware, to remain hardware agnostic. Sensors are going to change. Employing all of the best practices that we've heard for many, many years for software: modularity, configurability, reusability, to enable a flexible platform. There's still too many stovepipe architectures in these autonomous vehicles deployments that make the wide-scale deployment of these complicated. And I'll get back to determinism a little bit more, but deterministic processing, I think, is very important versus probabilistic in a lot of these autonomous vehicle applications if you're going to certify. So just some of the things. And then there's the vehicles. And vehicles, some of them have quirks, not just legacy vehicle platforms, but there's a big drive, obviously, for clean energy operations, and we use all kinds of EV vans, electric buses. These are relatively new, right? And so they also come because they're new, and they don't have sort of the massive production scale yet that some of the other forms of platforms have had. They come with quirks. There have been some EV company failures, so it can be a moving target for autonomy companies when the underlying platform is changing. Then there's a lot of interest in these. Hey, if I'm going to be developing an autonomous vehicle, not only should it be sustainable, of course, for the future, but it should look interesting. And maybe we should rethink the whole design of the automotive platform and how this should all work, or the passenger platform. And so then you get organizations that are coming up with these beautiful, futuristic platforms. We call them bespoke, custom shuttles, box shuttles. You might have heard different terms, but and they are, they're marvels of engineering. But because they're not as, again, widely developed, you're widely deployed, you have many limitations. They have to operate at slower speeds typically. They're not certified to run on public roads, so they don't meet FM, VSS, Federal Motor Vehicle Safety Standard compliance requirements, so they can only operate at certain speeds in certain domains. Some of them aren't designed with all the crashworthiness features that you would think of. Some of the newer ones are. And then there have been, production and company failures along the way. And I've known some of these companies, work with some of them, and it's been a sad thing. And so these are the things that make a hard problem a lot harder. You've got autonomy. You've created the autonomous driver, and then the underlying vehicle platform is unstable or not reliable. And this is happening a lot. And then, different programs want Buy America compliance, which can make it, keep on boxing in what your available options are. In some cases, there are no options. And then, you get some relief, and then, here's this one vehicle platform that we can use for this project that meets everything that we want to do. And it's not, a mass-produced vehicle. So, very important for us in the autonomy space right now to remain vehicle agnostic, have adaptable controls, know one way to control the vehicle. Where possible, leverage existing vehicle assets. My advice is to currently avoid bespoke vehicle platforms right now for autonomy until they've matured, maybe even operated in manual mode and have production volume. And leverage stable EV platforms, the ones that are out there that are from companies and that you think are going to be around a while, and just adaptability. Be ready to adapt the kit to the different platform, because there's no one vehicle platform that solves all human problems. Hence why there are many different vehicle platforms out there. And then expanding and evolving ODDs. What does this mean? Some companies will lead with, "Hey, I've got some capabilities. I can do autonomy," and then they go and they have a demonstration, and and then they realize, it's really only going to do something very limited. They're chasing their roadmaps, trying to kind of add features, and it just leads to bad customer experiences. And we've been seeing that, and we've been seeing, again, companies suffering, going out of business in some cases. There's definitely a mismatch between sort of AV technology provider speak and customer speak in terms of what they want very often, if they're from the transit space or construction space, depending on what the application is. And there's almost speaking two different languages, so there's ill-defined, very often, requirements for what the domains of operation need to be. A lot, and then scope creep. Oh, well, we want this. Well, that's a whole new feature. And unexpected edge cases. And there's this continuum of operational design domain needs, as opposed to something that can be more well-defined. And there's some people working on taxonomies and what have you. But it makes it very difficult to bid on projects. And tackle certain things unless you go in and say, this is the ODD and we're going to stick to that and everybody's on the same page, because there are hundreds of maneuvers and tens of thousands of edge cases. And so it's best to limit the scope of your ODD going into these operations, and you're seeing some of that, lower speed operations, maybe 35, 25 miles an hour, or in some cases less, I've seen. I think it's important that we build a better set of standards for characterizing ODDs, such that a company could say, well, we've got a vehicle that fits ODD profile A or B or C or D, and there's no mismatch, right? But that doesn't exist right now. There's been some attempts. But it's not, a standard or anything, or a well adopted standard or convention. And then more recently, actually leveraging things like GPT or LLM AI for rapid adaptation. There's some things that GPT AI, I believe, can do to generate new maneuvers and new things more rapidly, because it's really great at generating code. I mean, I think our experiences have been as such, and so I believe this is a tool that's going to help us accelerate adapting to these expanding needs and ODDs more rapidly. So getting a little more specific, reliable long-range detection, radar precision at a distance. If you want to see, if you're looking down an intersection, you want to make a left or even a right, and there's a vehicle coming to the left towards you at potential speed, higher speeds, you need to see down that lane reliably 150, 200 meters, and that's somewhat outside the range of practical limits for a lot of the current commercial grade sensors that are some are being used. There are some that claim longer range, and LiDAR definitely has range limits, especially with respect to whether it's a matte black vehicle versus shiny white vehicle. As Prem was just we were just talking about that, and there's plenty of limitations with cameras. Cameras, don't, I think get washed out with sunlight. With we've seen issues with the cameras on the Tesla vehicles with respect to their ability to see tractor trailers getting washed out. And then, but as you add range, you have to add processing power, because now you have more points and more data to process. And there's just an extraordinary amount of variability at intersections. A lot of people just think, oh, I'm going to come to an intersection, I got a left and I got a right, I got maybe looking ahead. But then intersections have hills, they have curves, they come at different angles, and so where are your sensors looking, and are they looking accurately at the lanes that you think they're looking at? So again, this is currently lowering our speed of ODD operations right now to be able to mitigate this while longer range LiDARs, for example, might scale up and maybe considering infrastructure sensing and vehicle to infrastructure, V to I type interfaces that can help address the blind spots in these geofence defined domains of operation. Similarly, or related, is seeing beyond just the roads around you. There's looking straight ahead and sort of driving on the road, and because you're driving fast and that's your path, and you're looking for things that are going to be in front of you, but you now have to look off to the side of the road. So immediately all of your processing power increases, because now you have to consider so many different things that are not just happening on like a clean road, but now this messy environment to your left and to your right. The trajectory of these objects, is somebody just standing there, or are they walking towards the road? Is their head faced away from you? Are they looking at you? Are they looking somewhere else? And there's no detection of eye contact or head direction really taking place. So it may increase false stops, false detections. You may have trees and bushes and other swaying objects in the wind that may trigger, depending on the sensitivity of these algorithms. And sudden stops can lead to accidents, right? Not just for people on board if they're not buckled up, if they're in shuttles, but for cars and other vehicles behind you. And then there's people now starting to foil the vehicles, right? So, there's an autonomous vehicle. Now we're going to try to fool it, right? Especially kids and other people. And then I've even seen people pushing people in front of these vehicles, right? So it's and there's going to be that, right? And then the newspapers will say, autonomous vehicle hits person, and it's all over for that company, right? And it was tragic, but somebody got pushed in front, and maybe that part of the story, isn't in the headline, and so there's that, and that will be increasing. And again, this is limiting our speed of ODD operations right now. Keep it slower. Add in thermal imaging sensing so that you can detect that there's a warm body out there instead of something that's not, right? If it's just an inanimate object, more inanimate. Off-road sensing in V2I, better object classification, and constraining your environment. In some cases, some groups are saying, well, we're going to add barriers in this sort of K barriers or something in this certain segment of operations. And then knowing exactly where you are. There are GPS outages. There are, if companies who rely on that, if you're using lane keeping, the lanes aren't always clearly marked. There's nothing sometimes to localize an environment if you're using a technology called SLAM, simultaneous localization and mapping, where you're trying to where you've sort of mapped where things are, and then you triangulate on that, and you say, oh, that's that building, or that's that sign. But if you're operating in a road where there's nothing, SLAM doesn't really work. SLAM is also very non-deterministic in many ways, and you can't always be guaranteed that it's going to work in all these cases. I know of cases where they've triangulated on trees in the winter, and then the trees got leaves in the summer, and that caused some problems. Non-determinism. Cost of external beacons. We've been using ultra-wideband in some cases, but there's a cost to modifying the infrastructure. So redundancy of there's redundancy of sensors, but there's also, it's very important to have redundancy of algorithms, like localization, enhanced lane markings, graceful degradation based on maybe what form of localization you're using. Drive a little slower if you're doing lane keeping or SLAM, and you don't have good GPS. And then localization aids via V2I. I really believe that V2I, vehicle to infrastructure, plays a very important role for scalable autonomy. Machine learning. Everybody loves it. There's a little bit of an intellectual curiosity bias. I've seen it. it's definitely been a shiny object, but it's certainly important too. And you know, I've used it, and it's very powerful. It's the many ways the wave of the future. But for trying to deploy vehicles, it's this probabilistic sort of prediction of what an object is or what's out there versus something that you can certify or know that it really is something. And then there's things like adversarial machine learning where people can put markers on stop signs, and then you've trained it to look at stop signs, and now that stop sign doesn't look like a stop sign, so you're blowing through a stop sign. So, and all kinds of, you can't train it on certain edge cases because those edge cases are dangerous to train against, right? Can't put a person in front of the vehicle. I mean, you might be able to simulate and do things like that, but is it really learning what that real human being looks like when they're in front of your vehicle? So just some mitigations there. Don't solely rely on it in autonomous vehicles now. Redundancy of algorithms is important. I also believe in watchdog checking, having independent, verifiable, validatable systems that are monitoring. I call it like the psychiatrist for autonomy, just asking the AV, are you okay, but getting information and doing independent checking, maybe diverse redundancy, and verifying and validating that the system is okay, and maybe leveraging GPT AI to help you determine what some of the independent checks should be. So there's where one form of AI can help another form of AI, just diverse, redundant AI. And then anomalies in edge cases. GPT AI can really create horrifying looking tornadoes. That just looks horrible. And but yes, there are, there's bad weather, heavy rain, snow, fog, winds, tornadoes. What happens when the first autonomous vehicle is driving down the road in Florida? I've lived in Florida, and there's a tornado or a water spout. Is it going to just keep on driving towards it? I don't think anybody's tested that. Low profile object detection. Is that a speed bump? Is that someone lying in the ground? Is there a sinkhole ahead? That's negative obstacle detection. Turning around on narrow roads, there's power lines down, so I'm going to turn around, but there's ditches on the side of the road. How's the vehicle going to do that, or is it just going to sit there as the tornado's coming? And then the purposeful and malicious activities that will increase, right, as there's more autonomous vehicles, down power lines, cyber attacks. And so what do? Weather monitoring, dynamic adaptive filtering based on the level of weather, graceful degradation of the vehicle, more V2I, and again, maybe leveraging GPT AI for accelerating our ability to handle some of these edge cases. And I also think a shared edge case database. Why aren't companies, and I know there have been some limited efforts, but I haven't seen anything where, maybe should every autonomous vehicle company be sharing in some anonymous fashion or whatever if they need to, non-anonymous or anonymous, edge cases so that we can learn from one another and provide the safest solution? That would be nice. And then, last but not least, filling the human operator gaps. People talk about driverlessness, and let's say we're going to take the driver out of the seat. Well, then who's going to help somebody on and off the transit van or the bus? Someone's having a medical emergency. Who's on board to help them? Charging and fueling the vehicle. Tractor trailers, we did a project, and we're very far into it, and then they're like, oh, you also have to automate the glad hands connections. I'm like, what are glad hands? I've never heard of glad hands. I'm not a trucking person, and that's in the yard trucks, connecting the air hoses from the terminal tractor to the trailer, such that if I guess it comes undone, the brakes kick on. And so who's going to connect those up? And there's all different configurations. Well, you need robotic hands for that. Well, we don't make robotic hands. We're an autonomous driving company. Who's going to make the robotic hands? So all kinds of things there, and I think we're still focusing onboard job roles, knowing that there's still jobs and there's still roles to play, that the autonomy is not playing. Positioning staff on routes, having emergency response teams available, trying to detect emergency events on board, including people detection. If you're going to do automated boarding and lighting, you have to know that people are seated before you take off. There's people waiting for the vehicle, like I'm thinking of buses. And then those automated and robotic arm functions, if you want to close the gap. So those are 10. So what does this mean for the 10 challenges and mitigations? And I think the combination of them, are the things that jump, to my mind, and there are others, that make this a very complicated problem. So how do we address this? And I've thought a lot about this. And I think phase one is kind of what some companies are doing now. Just stick to a controlled or geofence zone, application specific. There are applications out there now, campuses and downtown transit circulator loops, construction sites, and what have you, mining, where you can have limited and well-defined ODDs. Maybe they're operating at slow speeds, leveraging existing and stable vehicle platforms, legacy assets, flexibility with the AV modules that you're using, and leveraging V2I where you can, and still leveraging onboard and emergency personnel. And in the blue down there is and I'll be proven wrong, but that's the crystal ball for when I think that this will be most appropriate. Phase two is now scaling over the next 3 years, scaling, showing that you can scale this model with multiple vehicles across these different use cases, still maintaining the well-defined ODDs, but now you can scale production a little bit. You can standardize, you can, because you have a stable, safe examples that can provide real benefit now at scale, and the companies that are building the technology can scale, and you can have a more stable ecosystem of hardware and software. And then leveraging GPT AI to start to handle the different maneuvers that may be involved too. I think this is probably the appropriate time frame for that, may or may not come to be. But existing and stable vehicle platforms still. Phase three, I think, I hear a lot about robotaxis and trucks. I think it's a great application. I just think it's further out there, personally. But if we're going to expand our vertical use cases and different applications, more well-defined ODDs, but limited open road operations, trucks just going to be on the highway. The robotaxis are going to be in this still some sort of geofenced operation, albeit bigger, like a city like San Francisco, but with an expanded vehicle infrastructure and maybe fleet-level vehicle-to-vehicle communications to make the deployment safe and reliable. And then phase four tends to be when the CEOs of these companies stand up on stage at CES and they say, we're going to do this by this year. They're thinking of this wide adoption because they've got to think like that. It's the innovator's dilemma. They have to think big for these large companies. And but I think we're further out there, much further out there than is advertised. But we can see wide adoption of self-driving cars, unrestricted open road operations for these consumer-grade vehicles. But I think it's going to require more pervasive V2I and V2V, which is not going to happen overnight, and it's not necessarily, economical. But as you create these pockets of well-defined ODDs, in the earlier phases, you already have pockets where it's popular, and then those can become replicable across a broader swath of the United States and beyond. Massive GPT AI application opportunities for accelerating the types of maneuvers that we're handling in edge cases, and then maybe also rolling in novel vehicle bespoke platforms as they become more proven, and then have a wide adoption path for them to make them commercially viable. So, in closing, I think I may or may not have convinced you that this is the most complicated technical problem, but I think it certainly is up there. And there are fundamental complexities that I shared, just some of them that just one encounters on a day in, day out basis. And I'm not talking about myself. I'm talking about other peers and companies and what have you that I've crossed paths with over the last 20 years. There are paths to mitigation for all this. I think it drives sort of a proper trajectory for how to roll out safely autonomous vehicles in sort of broad phases. And it's not to say that every company has to follow that trajectory, but setting realistic expectations for the robotaxi companies and the trucking companies and the consumer automotive companies that maybe they're going to be a little bit further out there, and still achieve the dream and the vision of full autonomy everywhere for everyone, as we follow, I think, a safe path to productive, safe, reliable autonomy. So thank you. I hope you enjoyed the show Driven with me, Paul Perrone, your host. Don't forget to check us out at driven.show on the web, and give us a thumbs up or subscribe here if you like the show. Thank you for listening in. See you soon.